She had the right one. That's the right one. That's not that. That's not that. That was the one that I wanted to write. Let's keep it one. I just tried to drop it. And then you have the supporting documents.
Anyone ready?
Go for it. I have no idea. Do you have the magic touch? Oh, yes,
We'll call to order this meeting of the Dickinson Public School Board. Our first agenda item is public participation. Mrs. Peterson, have there been any requests for public participation?
Madam President, there have been none.
Okay, thank you. Before we continue, I just wanted to mention that we have Ms. Schultz here from the press, in case anyone was wondering. Andrew isn't here this evening, but Ms. Kelsey Schultz is. You're welcome. Brings us to our next item, additional agenda items or removal of items from the consent agenda. Are there any additions or removals? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. What are the wishes of the board?
Madam President,
Mrs. Fair.
I move to approve the agenda, including the consent agenda consisting of the minutes from the March 14th regular board meeting and the March 14th public open forum / state mandated planning, the bills for April 2016, the financial reports for April 2016, the pledged assets report for April 2016, the personnel reports, and the student staff recognitions as presented.
I was second.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Mrs. Fair and seconded by Mrs. Rood. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and assuming a roll call vote, all in favor please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion carries unanimously. Okay, we are on to item number 5, superintendent report.
Madam President.
Dr. Sullivan.
Madam President, members of the board, I just have 3 items that I would like to present to the board tonight. First, for those board members on the committee, please remember the negotiations are scheduled for Wednesday at 6 p.m. And also on Wednesday, but at 4 p.m., we have a teacher evaluation instrument committee meeting. So if you have that, if you're on those committees, please put those on your calendar. And then I'd like for the board to go to the supporting documents and pull up the document that's marked Advanced Ed Standards.
3 and 5?
3 and 5. As the board is aware, Advanced Ed is our accrediting organization. I know that you're all aware of that. I thought that it might be instructive for the board to become a little more familiar with the standards that drive the work in the school district. And you can see there on the very first page that Advanced Ed actually has 5 standards. They have a standard on purpose and direction, governance and leadership, teaching and assessing for learning, resources and support systems, and standard number 5, using results for continuous improvement. In terms of these standards, the standards that guide our work on a daily basis and what goes on in the school district are largely standards 3 and standard 5, teaching and assessing for learning and using results for continuous improvement. The principals have been working over the course of the year to familiarize their faculty with these standards and the indicators underneath of the standards. And I have provided those a couple of pages down for the board to look at and to become a little more familiar with. You can see that standard 3 has 12 indicators underneath of it. And looking at these indicators very closely align to the evaluation process that's in place in the school district now. I guess a quick example is standard 3.11, all staff members participate in a continuous program of professional learning. That's very close to a statement that is in the teacher's evaluation model that was adopted this year. And so I just wanted the board to become more familiar with these standards and indicators and begin to understand them a little bit, so that when we have the visitation coming up in 2 more years, 3 years, something like that. coming up just around the corner, that the board will be familiar with these standards and indicators. And Madam President, that's all I have to report tonight.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Dr. Sullivan? Mrs. Fair?
I have a question for Dr. Sullivan. As I was looking at these advanced ed standards, my question was when the team comes and so forth, do they say to look at a standard and then will they look back at what professional development has been held, how many teachers have gone? Is it that level of detail, or is it a more general global level of detail when advanced ed comes and checks these standards?
Madam President.
Dr. Sullivan?
Madam President, this is fair. It's more global. They don't get down to just, the professional development. They take a look at the larger picture. In addition to that, the visitation team will take a look at the requirements that were placed on the district in 2013
Okay.
to see how the district progressed on those. And just so the board is aware, I was required in November to provide an update on our progress on those requirements. And there was one that we were still working on at the time, which the board looked at its workshop, or at its state mandated planning, which is the central administration office structure. And I have until November to provide them with another report on that. And I will advise them that the board has made the necessary progress on that issue at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Dr. Sullivan? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to our business topics. We have item A, DPS Foundation update. We have Mr. James Peters here to give us an update on what the foundation is doing.
Thank you. I have a couple of handouts here, if I may. Oh, there's enough, I think, there. And for you. Well, I'm here and representing the Dickinson Public Schools Foundation. The foundation has been active, as we have said before. We are always interested in finding more money, and more money means we can do more things to help out the teachers in the system. The highlights, some of the highlights anywhere from last year, we did move our office out of the schools, and it's over at, if you're familiar, at 148 3rd Avenue West, Mike Park has an investment office there, and we now have the upstairs of that, and it made a very nice change for us.
Nice, good.
We did change or revise the mission statement a little bit this year. And so that now we say that the mission of the Dickinson Public Schools Foundation Incorporated is to provide private financial support to enrich the quality of education in the Dickinson Public Schools. Now last year we received over $72,000 in grant requests. We only funded approximately, well, it's $21,291. We were set to go somewhere around 28 or 29, but this is what the board figured we needed in there. And these topics range from health and fitness to science and technology. There were all sorts, and we were very pleased with the requests that we had. Now we've awarded in the past, or up until this point, somewhere around $325,000 in grants. So we think it's a working program. Karen Height, our Director of Development, met with the district-wide PAC this past December and gave an overview of the foundation to that group. Our Mystery Dinner Theater is still our signature event. We raised the most money there, the quickest and easiest, I guess, which this year was somewhere around $7,500. And we figure that we not only get money, but we get friends that way too, because everybody seems to enjoy it. On the scholarship side, we've got 4 scholarships that are managed by the Dickinson Public Schools Foundation. The Michael Callahan Memorial Scholarship this year is awarded to Tate Martell. Jack Carlson's Memorial Scholarship the George Frenzel Memorial Scholarship, and Nancy Scherson Music Scholarship. We also each year have provided $1,500, and I believe that the superintendent manages that. It's to help these groups that are going on a out of state to some kind of a competition, and it's not a lot, but hopefully the little bit is of value. Now on this packet that I handed out, the backside shows all of the foundation members, and inside is a list of all of the grants that have been okayed or given out since the start of this program. And you'll see there are quite a few, and I think we represent all schools in that group if you look through that. Sometimes they look like they're a continuation of a year before or anything, and that does happen, that if something needs something extra be put in, we will do that. Now, we're always interested, and we ask our teachers that they can have a what do you call it? Where it's taken out of, yeah. Anyhow, they can have it taken out of their salaries and donate it that way. We also have a couple of good donations from the city, people who have put us into their will, and they're really interested too in helping out the Dickinson Public Schools. Do you have any questions for me? That might be the easiest way.
Are there any questions for Mr. Peters?
Madam President,
Mrs. Ross?
I serve on that foundation, and we appreciate you coming, Mr. Peters. We also appreciate the fact that if you have a chance to, board members and teachers, if you have a chance to see the results of some of those grants and some of the things that our educators are doing to be creative and innovative, and some of the programs that have been brought back. We've been treated, Jim, you should have mentioned being treated to some of those students that have come back before us on the foundation to show us what they have done and how that has really enriched not only their lives but ours too. We talk a lot about the drums and everything, but world music and things like that, but the program is really alive and well, and we appreciate the support from not only the Dickinson Public Schools, but the community as a whole.
Thank you, and you're exactly right. Many of the teachers have come back and will show us what's happening with the money that was used in their programs, and it is very rewarding to see what's happening. The drums catch a lot of attention because they're so obvious, you know. But it's really, we've had some very, very good programs from it.
Well, thank you, and I just wanted to echo Mrs. Ross. I think this is a great benefit of this partnership that we have with the foundation and Dickinson Public Schools, and we're grateful for all the hard work that you do for our teachers and students.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, we'll move on to item B, the Dickinson Middle School construction update. We have some friends here from Mortensen Construction.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm Barry Morgan with Mortensen Construction, and Colby Robinson with Mortensen is here as well. We've prepared just a brief slideshow to give you an update of the activities that occurred since our last update, which was in January. So along the way, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you or anybody on the board might have regarding the project. So, do we back, Colby? Hey, there we go. So this is an image of basically where we wrapped up the last time that we gave a presentation on the construction. What you can see on the far right-hand side is just some of the structural steel that was started in what I'm going to say is the east end of the project site in the classroom wing. So we're going to progress through basically up to where we are today. One of the first things we had to do was bring in our precast. Those create the courtyards and the classroom wing that will be used for open learning environments. Then it was heavy into setting all of the structural steel. In this photo, you can see towards the middle part of February, all the structural steel has been set and erected for the classroom wing of the building. And then that white stuff you see around there, we had to wrap the building so we could provide heat inside the building to thaw out the subgrade so we could begin doing underground plumbing and electrical work. And
So was it just to block the wind off of you guys?
that's part of it. That's part of it. There is some of that.
Yeah, I was sitting there watching.
There is some of that.
Well, it also provided heat for the deck above.
Yeah.
For the concrete.
Yeah.
floor,
So, and in this slide, like Colby just alluded to, this is workers placing the concrete on the second floor of the classroom wing, using that heat from below to help cure the concrete, so there wouldn't be any quality issues. Here's an image of some underground plumbing going in I believe this is in one of the courtyards, but it's actually in what we call Area A, or the classroom wing of the building. So a lot of work has gone on. All this stuff has been backfilled and inspected and ready to go by the city. And then this is an interesting image that Jason Meyering from DLR took when he was on a site visit. He had a special camera. Colby and I discussed it. It's some type of fisheye kind of deal, but it gives an interesting perspective of all the work going on in Area A with the tenting on both sides, and then all the excavation and backfilling that's going on with all of the underground plumbing. The nice part about showing you some of these progress photos are, these are all the things that when you guys move into the building, you forget are really there, that actually help make the building do what it needs to do.
So the steel's not curved that way.
Yeah,
It's just like-
yeah.
No, but it is an interesting image.
And then here's a perspective from March, and you can see in the middle of the photograph, we've started to set the structural steel for what would be the forum and commons area. And then you'll see a couple of, on the far left-hand side where Colby has the mouse there, those are some precast panels that start identifying where the gymnasium will be on the west side of the project site. This is a photo later in March that identifies, this is really the main entrance on the south side of the facility. And the structural steel that you see there, the lower level would be where the administration offices are, just outside of the forum space. This just shows the progress where all of a sudden all the precast has been on site. We're ready to go. You see the gymnasium is formed on the left-hand side of the site. So really the interesting part about this is really giving you the size and shape of what the school is going to feel like as we continue to progress through construction. An image of the structural steel being set in the gymnasium. This work is completed as we speak today. You can see the ductwork, the mechanical systems being routed through the structural steel as they try to erect all this stuff together. Boys and tinker toys is basically the way it goes together. This is a great image in the forum looking to the east. The main entrance would be off to the right, and the cafeteria, the food service area is just to the right. Then the administrative offices are just a little bit further down in that space. This is an image of on the far east end of the building. If you recall, back during the design phase, we did find some small pocket of coal in that corner. This was a recommendation from the design team and the engineers to put in a methane venting system. So this is just the installation of that system to ensure that there are no issues that occur with where that seam ended up being buried. This is an image of the second floor. As you can see, we're starting to frame out with the metal stud structures there where some of the classrooms get defined in the corridors and hallways. What you see kind of protruding, kind of coming out of you at the photo where Colby's pointing the mouse there, that's the channel system that supports the glass partitions. If you recall, the design really incorporates a lot of movable glass partitions, and that's the structural steel system to support all that stuff. And if you look way in the back, which you can't see, there's a lot of ductwork that's already started to be installed as well, back on
It's
that
hard to
end.
see.
Yeah.
So-
Colby, you want to
Yeah, sure.
take that one?
So this picture was taken last Wednesday as the precast erection continues over into the classroom wing as it progresses from west to east. So it's marching towards the east end and has since turned the corner now. And then has started to double back a little bit to set some of the intermediate pieces. So that's where the focus on the precast is today. And as that is occurring, the structural steel directors are continuing to detail out or to continue the rest of their structural steel erection in Area B as well as Area C, which is the gymnasium piece.
So the first 6 months, that progression of those photos to go from when we started earthwork to where we showed that structure, a lot happens and the building looks like it's coming and gone really, really fast, and now it's gonna look like we aren't doing anything out there. But we're gonna be working very frantically inside the building to do all the interior construction stuff. So a lot less will be visible to the public as it relates to what's going on, but we'll continue to give updates.
So to Barry's point, we've been blessed with good weather to come that far in a short period of time. This just shows the schedule we published last time at the board meeting with the progress bar I put here. So it shows us into April and coming on to May. Strong finish with structural steel and precast is coming up. The interior rough in, where we call the installation of all the mechanical, electrical systems inside the building, as well as the structural stud framing, that has started, as you can see in that classroom area. And then on to the rest of our enclosure with the roofing is coming up here shortly, as well as the window installation, where we're marching towards that water tightness at the end of summer. So that's where we are today. So just progress by the numbers. Number of workers on site today, 67. Cubic yards of concrete poured, 4,280. The tons of steel with the metal deck erected, 804. And then the square footage of the walls erected, 40,514. And very important, 0 recordable injuries on the project today. So we're extremely proud of that.
Absolutely. That's our brief update, and we'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I did feel sorry for your guys the other day when it was snowy and windy, and I saw them on the very top with their harnesses and everything on, and I was thinking how awful it had to be up there and how they kept their feet, because it was, I mean, it was whipping and it was snowing. I thought, you guys missed out on months of snow. Today you're paying for it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But great, no zero injuries, but they were super harnessed, so but still, not me.
Any other questions? Mrs. Fair?
Do you feel that you're ahead of schedule or pretty much right on schedule?
We're pretty much right on schedule
Right on?
right now.
Yep.
Perfect.
I think if you stay ahead of schedule, it's bad, super.
We're not behind, right?
We're not behind.
We're not behind schedule, that is for sure.
Well, thank you so much. I think we are all really excited about the progress that we're seeing over there. We appreciate all of your hard work and giving us these updates.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to business item C, our teacher grievances. So, we've received 4 grievances. I just want to kind of outline what we're going to do. We'll have Dr. Sullivan give us an update, kind of how the grievances have proceeded to this point. And then we'll have the teachers and/or the representative come and talk to us, present what they want to present, and then we'll have an opportunity for the board members to ask questions. Dr. Sullivan?
Madam President, members of the board, we have received grievances from our speech language pathologists in the school district, requesting an extended contract of 75 days, which I will let them clarify for the school board. I don't want to speak for them. The grievances were first presented to the building principals in accordance with the grievance procedure, and building principals provided their written reply. The grievances were then forwarded to me. I had five teachers, 5 speech language pathologists, Dana Price, Sherry Loris, Merrill Paulstrom, Ellen Getz, and Jill Nelson Wetstein submit grievance to my office. I did meet with them and provided them with my written decision also. And on March 29th and 30th, we received 4 grievances requesting an audience with the school board from Sherry Loris, Merrill Paulstrom, Ellen Getz, and Jill Nelson Wetstein. And those grievances are before the board tonight. And the negotiated agreement says that the grievances will be placed on the agenda for the next board meeting, which they have been. And the board will communicate in writing the decision to the grievance within 14 days after the meeting at which the board renders its decision. And so the purpose of this agenda topic is for the board to hear these grievances at this time.
Okay. So at this time, we'd like to invite the specific pathologist. You can do it however you want. If you want to come one at a time, if you want to come as a group, that's fine. And if you have a representative, they're certainly invited to come forward as well.
Before we begin, Madam President, we'd like to clarify one thing.
Just one moment, please.
There's a roadblock.
Before we begin, I see that Mrs. Price is at the table, and we did not receive a grievance for the school board.
Yes, I would like to clarify that. I was out of town that week, and so I brought it into the central office the morning of, and they said that they were going to make sure that you got it before the day end. It was given to the front desk.
Madam President, may I ask Ms. Price a question?
Sure.
Ms. Price, who did you hand it to?
It was given to the lady at the front desk. I was out of state, so I had somebody drop in.
You walked right in?
Yep. They had it in a large vanilla envelope with Mr. Rick's name on it, and said they would have it to her by 3 o'clock that day.
I have not seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
May I have it briefly?
Yes, please. And we're just going to take a
Thank
brief
you.
business to try and figure
Okay,
this out.
thank you.
No.
Change your mind there.
Cookies, you have some milk?
What?
Cookies and maybe some milk?
Yeah, I'm getting milk, so get your cookie.
Fruit and veggies.
He's down there at the, at hospice. It's awful. Yep. Unfortunately.
Madam President?
Dr. Fine.
Mrs. Price, I apologize, because this is the first I've seen of it. I have two witnesses to
okay.
verify that I went and found it under a pile of papers.
Okay.
And so, while I don't know the day that it was returned or brought in, can you give me that date? Do you remember the date when you brought it in?
You can help me, we did it
It was
on
a
the
couple
same
days
date.
after we gave ours, so.
I came in that following
It's the
day.
same
Does
day.
anybody
Same
know?
day.
Brought mine in.
The same day that Ellen
Yeah, that dropped.
Ellen
presented
Getz
hers.
and I dropped ours off on the same date. I
believe
don't have
it's
my
the
calendar with
30th.
me.
You and Mrs. Getz?
Mhm.
I'll look it up.
Okay.
So Ms. Katie,
I would say yes.
okay. All right, thank you for giving us the time to straighten that out. We are ready to listen to what you'd like to tell us at this point.
Okay, we'd like to start, I don't know how we're going to share this, but we'll do our best. Okay. We just wanted to start by introducing ourselves, and then we're going to present some information that will hopefully clarify kind of who we are, what we do, and what brought us to this point, why we're here tonight, and then we'll answer any questions that you've got after that. So first, we wanted to just introduce ourselves. Go ahead, Ellen.
My name is Ellen Getz. I'm the speech pathologist at Prairie Rose Elementary. I also serve students on a regular basis at Hope Christian Academy. I'm also responsible for speech IEPs and for any speech evaluations and consultations at both Dickinson High School and Trinity High School. I also have preschool students who come to Prairie Rose Elementary to receive speech services from me on an individual basis. I've been a speech pathologist for 20 years, the last 13 of which have been in the Dickinson Public Schools. 7 before that were in another school district in North Dakota.
I'm Jill Nelson-Weststein. I'm a speech pathologist at Lincoln Elementary. I've been with the district for 33 years, all at the same school, but with various assignments, going to different places. I service kids currently just at Lincoln, but I do also have preschool students that come into me. Did I miss anything?
I'm Meryl Falstrom, and I work at Heart River Elementary. I have 36 years of experience in speech-language pathology, 16 of which are with Dickinson Public Schools. The remainder of those were in one other school district, and also I worked at Rehab Visions, the hospital, and St. Benedict's Nursing Home.
I'm Sherry Loris. This is my second year with the district, 4 years as a speech-language pathologist. I cover Roosevelt Elementary, Berg Elementary, and Hagen Junior High School. And I also have a preschool student that comes to Roosevelt.
I'm Dana Price, and I've been a speech-language pathologist here in Dickinson in the school district for 15 years. I work at Jefferson Elementary School. I do supervision for our SLPA. I do early childhood center evaluations and assist there with assessments, and then I also see 3-year-old preschoolers at our school at Jefferson Elementary.
Okay, speech-language pathology is a federally mandated service. Although we maintain North Dakota teachers' licenses, we are different from classroom teachers. That's part of why we want to give you some explanation this evening. We see students individually and also in small group settings. We create individualized lesson plans based on the child's individual education plan created for each student, whether they are seen individually or in a group. We create our own curriculum based on the child's needs, goals, and objectives as documented through the IEP.
The next thing we're going to do is go over a chronology of the grievance, and if you will look in your handouts, it's called Meeting Dates and Times Asking for Support. And before I go any further, speech pathologists are notorious for using acronyms and slang. And so anytime that we refer in our handouts to an SLP, it is a speech language pathologist. Anytime we refer to an SLPA, it's a speech language pathology assistant. And you'll notice that so that we don't have to keep saying speech language pathologist or speech language pathology assistant, which is a mouthful.
They'll probably save us about 5 or 6 minutes.
As you'll see on the chronology, we began speaking to Doc Martinson, the special education director, last spring in regards to our concerns about the fact that we were going to be several speech pathologists short. And we were concerned about covering those positions, knowing that the shortage of speech-language pathologists is not only a Dickinson problem, but a state problem and national problem as well. We also met in August with Dot Martinson to discuss our concerns and to discuss options for ways that we were going to cover these students. In October, we sent a letter to Dr. Sullivan informally, and we did meet with Dr. Sullivan after that. And at the meeting in December, he had stated that he had an idea, but to this date, we still do not know what his idea was. In January, we met with the Dickinson Education Association to discuss our options. And then beginning in February, we began the formal steps of a grievance process. The rest of it talks about the grievance process that we have gone through, ending with and leading to the meeting with the board today.
Okay, the next handout you've got in your packet discusses the responsibilities of a school-based speech-language pathologist. We do work in a lot of different environments, but this kind of discusses a lot of our responsibilities day to day. We evaluate and treat students with educationally or functionally relevant communication problems. We accept referrals, we do observe and screen students, we plan interventions and carry out those interventions. We conduct assessments, we share those assessment results with the individual education plan teams. We make eligibility recommendations. We serve students who are identified as eligible for speech services. We complete state and federal procedural compliance paperwork, and we bill Medicaid for eligible students in the district. We also participate on committees. We complete that procedural compliance paperwork. We engage in many activities to support all students in the district. We also, in this district, most of us, as you heard, cover multiple schools. You've probably all heard of IDEA. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act provides for speech and language services for school-age children with communication disorders that adversely affect the child's educational performance. This means that speech and language services are federally mandated. So who do we work with? In the schools, we work with children who are hearing impaired, who have cochlear implants, who have articulation issues or speech sound disorders, apraxia, autism, several different special populations. We didn't try and list all of them, but that includes and is not limited to cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, Prader-Willi, cleft palate, etc. Children with pragmatic or social skills issues, children with expressive and receptive language difficulties, vocabulary, comprehension, problem solving, following directions, grammar, language processing difficulties, memory, reasoning, figurative language, attention, cognition, augmentative alternative communication, voice, traumatic brain injury, fluency or stuttering, and swallowing. And then the next handout you've got in front of you that we wanted to make you aware of is our we broke down as a group the time that we are required or that we put into doing a single evaluation of the student. It varies, obviously, if it's a really straightforward child with just articulation or if it's a child that's got a lot going on. But we tried to kind of come up with an average. Obviously, an average that varies by 4 hours is a little bit tricky, but you can see what goes into that. There's a lot of planning before you ever meet with the child. There's the actual testing that you do. We have meetings before, we have meetings to go over it, then we have the paperwork that goes with that. With the number of evaluations that we're doing this year, and you'll see that on a sheet that's coming up, but with the number of evaluations that we're doing and the number of students on our caseload right now, we end up having to cancel student services in order to complete the testing, and there's literally no way to do the paperwork without taking it home and doing it at nights and weekends. So this is just for information to kind of see that number of hours per evaluation, and then you'll see the evaluations that we've each done to this point in the school year.
The next handout that you have is speech-language pathologist caseload numbers, April. And we did update our numbers. You may have received our March numbers from Dr. Sullivan, but we updated them for April numbers. As you will see on the caseload, which is listed under each speech pathologist's name, caseloads range from 36 to 61. I do want to point out that Michelle Callahan is at the bottom, and she is a part-time speech pathologist, and so her caseload, she only sees Trinity Elementary East and Trinity Elementary West, and so her caseload is lower because she puts in, I don't know the exact number of hours per week, but she is part-time. But the caseloads are high, from 36 to 61. By the end of the year, most of us will have evaluated between 26 and 49 students. And when you consider those 13 to 17 hours per student that we've evaluated, that is many, many hours. The meetings that you will see that we have regarding students, to date, they range from 72 to 103 meetings that we have held on students. And many of us have many more meetings yet to schedule this year because we are not completed with our assessments of students, and all IEPs have not been completed yet this year. That is one handout on numbers. If you will look at the next handout, it is a historical caseload of one Dickinson Public School speech language pathologist, and it goes from 2009 to 2015 and 16. And it reflects the numbers for just one of us. But all of the DPS numbers and the rising numbers of caseloads would be very similar to what you're seeing on this handout. The caseload average from 2009 to 2015 is 30.8 students, or 31 students. But the 2015 to 16 caseload is 55 students, which reflects a total of 77% increase. The next handout, again, SLPA and SLPA, you're going to hear that quite a bit. We contacted several schools within the Big Nine to compare caseload size with. In Grand Forks, the elementary caseload is 30 to 35 students. The early childhood special education tries to stay under 20, and in our district, Early Childhood Center has 61 students on their caseload compared to 20. They only employ speech language pathologists, no assistants. In Bismarck, their average caseload number is 35 students, and that speech pathologist in Bismarck that we spoke with also has a speech language pathology assistant for 2 days a week. In Mandan, we talked to a speech pathologist at Red Trail, which has an enrollment of 340 students, which is very comparable to Prairie Rose Elementary, where we have one speech pathologist who covers multiple schools. And at Red Trail, they have 2 full-time speech language pathologists, and their average caseload is 30. In West Fargo, we talked to Legacy Elementary speech pathologist and Freedom Elementary speech pathologist, and they use what's called a weighted system to determine caseload, and that is dependent on the severity of students and the number of minutes served for students. One speech language pathologist there had a caseload of 18, but she saw more severe students, so her caseload was much less. And one speech language pathologist had a caseload of 32, and there are no speech language pathology assistants in West Fargo. Their average caseload size is 25. In Fargo, we contacted a speech pathologist at Bennett Elementary with a caseload of 32 to 34. That's their average caseload. They have 1.5 speech language pathologists at Bennett Elementary. And Fargo also uses a weighted system for determining caseload number, dependent on the severity and the amount of time needed to serve each child's individual needs. We spoke to 3 speech pathologists in Minot. 2 were at Lewis and Clark, and 1 was at Bel Air Elementary. And their caseloads all range between 30 and 35 students, and their preschool caseloads are always lower in Minot as well. Numbers ranging for preschool is 20 to 28, and again, we're comparing that to a caseload of 61 at our early childhood center. The average caseload of Dickinson Public Schools speech language pathologists now is 51, which is more than 1.5 times the average of 32 students that is the average in the North Dakota schools that we contacted.
Okay, so you can see kind of what we've been up against this year, and the drastic difference from kind of the norm, I guess you would say. We wanted to explain why that's important beyond just us as employees of Dickinson Public Schools. one of the reasons that's important and significant is the impact it has on our students. Our students are dealing with decreased frequency in sessions or decreased times that they're seen. They are also deal with decreased amount of times or amount of minutes that we're able to see them. They're seen in larger group sizes. Those groups are not always well matched. We might have students with totally different goals or at different levels of functioning that we have to pair together in order to get them seen at all. We have less time to plan for our students and less time to research their disability. You heard all the different types of students we deal with. We may have a student with stuttering for once every 2 or 3 years, or we might have 3 on our caseload at one time. And so if we haven't dealt with a certain type of student, we really need that time to study that or to collaborate with other SLPs. We have less time to create a curriculum. We have little or no time to collaborate with our classroom teachers or special education staff or other SLPs. We have no time to review our classroom teachers' lesson plans. And all of that is impacting our students, negatively impacting our students' progress. Another impact that these high numbers have and the shortage is having, or possible impact, would be impacts on the district. Those would include an increase in due process hearings. Right now, the district does not have any of those. Luckily, knock on wood, but we don't have any of those yet. We could be out of compliance with state and federal law for not meeting paperwork and deadlines. We could face the possibility of losing funding or facing the state monitoring the district due to non-compliance. And we as SLPs have not had the time to complete our federally mandated paperwork during our contract hours.
We as speech language pathologists here in Dickinson believe the district has set precedents and acknowledged extra pay for extra work. The district has offered extended contracts to teachers taking on the responsibilities and duties of vacant positions. Examples of this would be Pete Dobitz when he went on deployment, Paige Jordan, who vacated her position after approximately, it's either 6 or 9 weeks. The high school teachers took over for Paige Jordan's position. Trista Fisher took over for an English teacher, and high school teachers are paid when taking over for another teacher's class. In our grievance, we noted Section 5, Working Conditions, Subsection B, School Day, numbers 2 and 3, which involves 2 1/4 hours of unassigned responsibility and 1 1/2 hours of preparation and lunchtime, and that has been ignored. Our schedules are unique because we do not teach in a classroom. However, with the addition of other schools, increase in our caseload numbers, and ensuring that speech language services are provided to students for open positions, every possible minute in a day is utilized. Consequently, there is no unassigned time or prep time. In addition to the aforementioned time, we work additional time outside of our contract day to meet these needs. The last handout we gave you was a formula for how we figured out the 75 days. The requested 75 days equates to approximately 17 hours per week. 17 hours does not begin to cover the number of hours that we spend in each week beyond our contract time. With the increased number of students to service, increased number of meetings we've had, the extensive paperwork, and other requirements related to covering nearly half of an additional position, we are devoting as many as 20 to 30 hours beyond our contracted time and have been doing so all year. This is having an impact on our family time as well as our individual well-being and health. In conclusion, we are respectfully requesting to be compensated for 75 days running concurrently with our contract. We believe these funds have been budgeted for as we have had 3 positions available all year. We believe that if we are compensated as per our request of 75 additional days to run concurrently with our current contract, just as other teachers in this district have been compensated for vacated positions, this will be an equitable resolution to our grievance. We thank you very much for your time and your consideration in this matter, and we look forward to a positive outcome. And if you have any questions for us?
we will have questions. Mrs. Ross.
I have a question. I don't know which one of you would like to field it, but one of my questions here is, we know that the changing demographics, I think in March we had 39 students leave the district. I was just curious as to how many of these assessments have been completed and yet the students no longer remain with us? Do you have a general idea?
I can speak for my caseload. I have one.
You have one?
I evaluated one student this year I served for about 3 months and then he left the district. But we also have some that come
Yeah,
in.
I
so-
understand the open rolling door in and out.
Right.
So that was just curious to me.
I
Ellen?
can speak to that as well. I by the end of the year, I will have evaluated 28 students, which is high. In past years, if I would have evaluated 4 or 5 students, that would have been a typical year. And a reevaluation is different from an initial evaluation. Many of us do initial evaluations when it's a new referral. A reevaluation is someone who's already on an individualized education plan. And a reevaluation is sometimes a little bit easier to do because we can evaluate during their regular speech and language time. An initial evaluation is something that needs to be done some other time. And so consequently, I end up having to cancel kids to do an initial evaluation. Of those 28 evaluations that I will have done this year, 18 of them are new initial evaluations. And out of those, 4 have qualified for services so far. And so I suspect I'll probably have about 3 more that will qualify before the end of the year. It's a lot of extra time, and with putting in 10, a very bare minimum for a testing time is 10 hours for a student. I mean, it's very often we put in at least 15 hours by the time we do everything, meetings, paperwork, evaluations. That's a lot of time for 28 students that I've tested. And I know others have tested more.
Have any of yours moved?
The ones that I've tested that have moved, I have to think. I maybe had 1 that has moved.
And off the top of my head, I'm only picturing 1 that has moved.
For assessments, I have not had any that have moved.
I've had 0 but 1 plans to move next year as of now. That's up and
Between all of
pending.
you, we
Yeah.
have 5.
We'll give you half a point.
Yeah, thanks. 0.5.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sheets.
Yes. First off, I want to say thank you. It's just the first I've heard of this, and then I appreciate the extra work you've had to put in, and I thank you for your dedication and the long hours that you've had to do to make this work thus far. My question is, I noticed the 75 days, and just so it's more of a clarification thing, this would get you through this year, is that correct? The 75 days would get through this calendar year, and then next calendar year would have to kind of look at the situation in terms of who's been hired in the situation at that point, correct? So this is just to get that resolved. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Fair.
One of you mentioned the 20 or 30 hours beyond your contract time that you're working. Is that per week? You're
Yes.
working
Yes,
20 or
ma'am.
30 hours beyond your, and in the time that's outside of the contract time, what types of activities are you doing? Like seeing students or?
Outside of contract time, I am there most evenings till 6 or beyond, and I work most weekends. I work both days. And I am doing the mandated paperwork that goes along with all of the assessments and all of the IEPs.
I would say it's probably 70 to 80% paperwork. Yeah, paperwork is probably the vast majority of what we do outside of contract time. It varies from school to school. I cover 3 schools, and Berg and Hagen do some meetings during the day, some before and after. Almost all of my Roosevelt meetings are before or after, meaning they start at 7:45, which is not a lot, but it's a little bit before contract time. But all of my after-school meetings, I shouldn't say all, 95% go beyond that 3:45. And I've got 103 meetings so far this year, so that's a lot of time after contract hours.
So and some of that paperwork may also be scoring of tests. There's another scoring system a lot of us use for scoring tests that's not going to be reflected in the time that we spend on TINET, which is our system that we use for our paperwork.
Okay, so if I can have a follow-up, that you said some of it is meetings, like meetings with parents or IEP or something, is that what you're
With
saying?
the team, yeah.
Okay, so is-
Teachers and.
Yeah, and is that something that happened before? Is it usual that you have meetings with parents or teams outside of school, the contracted time? I don't know
Always.
that.
Yes.
We
I
always
always
do.
So you always do?
Yes,
Okay,
we
so
have
that's it.
meetings at 8, but usually we only schedule the ones that we know will be quicker at 8 because the classroom teachers need to be there for some of that. The longer meetings are usually scheduled for 3:15 or 3:30 because they will tend to go long. And so typically we go 4:30 with meetings.
That is
Um,
typical, it's just the number of them.
Mhm.
So we maybe would have had 30 last year, or 40, and we're double and triple that this year.
Typically, every meeting that we have results in some form of paperwork to follow. And so when we have meetings in the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, we see kids all day long. And so the paperwork that follows is the stuff that we do after hours.
And that would not include the planning, finding materials for students.
I wanted, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to follow up on something that was mentioned earlier, and I wanted to direct that question to Dr. Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan, I remembered it being mentioned that you had a possible solution. And can you tell me why that wasn't presented, or what that solution was, or can you just tell us what happened with that?
Madam President?
Dr. Sullivan?
Madam President, Ms. Fair. The possible solution was to try and navigate and find a way to pay the speech language pathologists for lost prep time. Because it's important for something not to get lost in this discussion. And I say this with all due respect to the speech language pathologists and the work that they do. What this board can deal with is a negotiated agreement, which runs from 8 to 3:45. What I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is that the request is to be paid for time outside of that time period, and that it comes up to approximately 75 days because of the formula that was presented. Probably somebody from DEA might have to answer a few questions and try and help the board navigate this, but I don't know if the board even has authority to be able to grant the request that has been made. Because as you saw in my response, I clearly stated to the speech language pathologist that I didn't have the authority to grant the request. And so the thought was to try and figure out a way to navigate to pay for the prep, because in the instances that have been referenced with Mr. Dobitz and what was the other ones?
Tricia Fisher.
Yeah, and that's what we paid for. That's what we paid for, was the lost prep time. And so that was the effort to try and negotiate that, because I'll stop there for right now.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Ross?
I'm sorry I missed it when you said, I would imagine it was the prep time, or that something was ignored. Does anybody remember what, I can't remember what it is.
That's what.
What I had said was that with the amount of unassigned time and the prep time, that's been ignored because we don't get those things.
You don't, okay. I'm sorry, I wrote ignored and then a question mark.
Madam Chairman, I do have one comment to what Dr. Sullivan said, and that is that I understand that those other teachers were paid for their prep time, and they were able to cover those classes during their prep time, and so that is what they were paid for. We are unable to cover the .43 additional positions that we have taken on during our prep time. It's way, way beyond prep time.
Madam President,
Mrs. Reed?
I just want to thank you guys for also just fulfilling more than your obligation, it sounds like, to the students. Thank you. That goes to your dedication to the students. One question I have kind of goes off of what Ms. Getz said. in regards to, I just want to clarify on this form that you guys have highlighted in yellow, the caseload numbers. You had alluded to stating that you had, and I don't know if it's included in these numbers, so that's what I guess my question is, had cases that came in that you tested but ended up not being part of your caseload?
Yeah.
So that's above and beyond what you have listed here?
Those evaluations are included in the evaluations that I have listed here.
For completed?
Yes.
Okay.
They may or may not have qualified. If they qualified, then they're part of my caseload number.
Okay.
And a caseload number fluctuates. My caseload used to be higher. I've had 8 students who have either been dismissed or have moved on. And so, I mean, it's always fluctuating, the caseload.
I do understand that because my son was on an IEP when we came into the district, so thank you.
Madam President,
Mrs. Webb.
I have 2 follow-ups for you. One, we often consider our demographically or suffering the same circumstances as Williston. Is there any reason we didn't reach out to Williston? I know you listed a lot of them. I mean, I gotta believe that they're in the same situation that you are.
I don't think we know for sure. I think we reached out to people that we knew. I didn't, because I don't know anybody. I'm not from here. But the SLPs that knew somebody in, for example,
Sure.
Mandan called that person, or Minot or whatever. So we called people that we knew, and we actually last night went, we didn't call anyone in Williston, and we just didn't have the time.
Because normally, you can understand that normally us in the West are usually forgotten in a lot of things, but we share a lot of things in common, and inward and outward migration happens to be one of them, and the socioeconomic standpoint of our kids and where they've come from are also very comparable, so that's why I ask. And the other thing is, I would caveat as well that one of the things of the negotiated agreement is the actual time frame, and it may not be something that we as a board can do, but we can certainly direct that to our negotiators as well. But I don't want to speak out of turn on that. But I also want to also commend you. My son Kyle spent every year he spent in Dickinson Public Schools with an LD teacher and a speech language pathologist. And he is a very successful young man in his own right, and I certainly owe that to Jefferson's, and correct me, Marilyn, what's her speech? Marilyn Kleingardner and Rhoda Hilden. So, and if you all know Rhoda, she was a hammer, and she was good for my son. So, I do know and appreciate the work that you do for students, and I know that you care about students, or normally we wouldn't be here, and I appreciate as well the professionalism and the homework that you have done and brought before this board to give us an idea what it is that you go through week after week in helping our students succeed. So I do want to say that I do appreciate that personally and as a member of this board.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam President?
Mr. Seeks.
This situation, I'm trying to get a handle on it, and I want to go beyond mere accolades, because obviously we appreciate what you're doing, but I'd like to see a resolution of some kind. And I guess my question is, knowing we need to fix this in some capacity, is there a way within not the confines of, but I use that word, of the current situation we have in the agreement, is there any other creative options that we could figure out that could get them properly compensated for these extra hours within that structure? We know that.
But what they've asked for, that's what we need to speak to.
Correct. I guess I
they've asked for
appreciate
the
that, and
extended
I'm looking
contract.
beyond the bigger,
Yep.
the big picture of.
I understand what you're saying.
I think that's an important point, Mr. Seeks. I share the concern of Dr. Sullivan that the solution that you specifically asked for may not be within the board's purview to grant. I don't think any of us are denying that there is an issue. or that you have done a lot of work this year. I think we need to speak to how the contract has been breached, if there's a breach of contract. I think we need data that shows that. I don't know, what are the thoughts?
Madam President,
Mrs. Fair.
I had 2 questions for Mrs. Martinson or for Dr. Sullivan. Can I just ask you?
I'll do my best.
Or maybe Mrs. Martinson. One, I wanted to know if the district is out of compliance with regard to the students and what our mandated responsibilities are. My second question, is this an increased number of cases this year? I realize we're down on staff, but is it more students?
Madam President.
Dr. Sullivan.
Madam President, Mrs. Fair. Out of compliance.
That was mentioned.
There's no established threshold for caseload that I'm aware of for speech-language pathologists in Century Code. There's no established caseload anywhere. We explored that a little bit during the 2 meetings that I had with the SLPs. And so I'm not aware of any established case threshold that we're out of compliance with. And then the second question is, do they have an increased caseload? Yes, they do. They've seen more students this year than they have in the past.
Mrs. Fair, were you wanting to know if the overall caseload of the district had increased?
Yes, the overall number of students within our district who are.
I believe it has. They can answer that for you better than I can.
Dot's nodding too, so, okay.
Well,
Well, those are averages though.
Yeah, those are individual averages.
Can I
And it's
make a
from 1%.
clarification?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't mention any caseload caps. That wasn't any mention of compliance. When we're talking about being out of compliance, we're talking about paperwork and
Right.
deadlines.
And that was what my question referred to, so that's why I was wondering from Dr. Sullivan or from Mrs. Martinson, if the district is out of compliance in that particular area. rather
May I
than
comment
numbers
on
of
that
cases.
also?
I'm asking Dr. Sullivan right now, though, that they mentioned that we may be out of compliance with regard to the federal law as far as paperwork, mandatory paperwork, and I'm wondering if we are out of compliance, are we in danger of that? I'm wondering from the district's perspective.
Madam President.
Dr. Sullivan.
Madam President, Mrs. Fair, I don't have an answer to that. And that would be something Mrs. Martinson might have to investigate or explore before we could provide that information to the students.
Okay. That's what I'm wondering.
Madam Chairman, may I comment on that?
Yes, you may.
You talked about being out of compliance. There's another way to look at that as far as out of compliance. If you go back and look at the numbers that we said that we needed to use for an assessment, we can't fit all the assessments into our day without canceling students. If we cancel students, then we are out of compliance because according to law, we are supposed to make up those sessions and we don't have enough time in the day to make up those sessions.
So is it like priority is evaluations first and then doing the actual work with the students second? I'm just trying, I do not know this answer.
There really isn't one over the other. I guess the simple answer is your evaluation has a deadline, a time frame. It has to be done in a certain number of days. That doesn't mean that you don't have to see the kids. I mean,
I'm just wondering.
that
if
has to
that's
happen
how the
consistently,
choices-
but you do face a deadline for evaluations.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. I really don't know about this area. Don't know anything. Okay.
Does the board at this time have any further questions for the SLPs?
Madam President, I don't know who this would be directed to, but when we started out with this section on our agenda, we were explaining the SLPs or speech language pathologists, but they also said SLPAs, the assistants. Do we have assistants? Are they able to help out with the student contact part of this? Or how does that process work?
We do have one. She works at 2 different places. She works at the Early Childhood Center and at Heart River. Do you know how many students she sees?
She sees 9 of my students 3 times a week, and she sees, I think she has a total caseload of 16, so she sees the other ones 1 day a week. I see them the other day a week. She cannot do any assessments. She cannot do any paperwork. She cannot do anything but see students. So she cannot help out with the paperwork
She can't
at
do
all.
testing.
She can't do testing.
Or meet with parents, but we do have one. We would love to have another one, or 2, or 7.
I would think that would help.
Mhm.
I would think that would help lighten a little bit of, I wouldn't say necessarily your responsibility, but your contact, so that you could maybe get some of your paperwork done during contact time.
If I could piggyback onto that, if I could, our speech language pathology assistant currently sees 48 students, which is far more than an average SLPA would see. She sees 48 students, and then she does have to be supervised to see those students a percentage of the time.
It really doesn't lighten the load because my schedule is full and I don't have any time to get paperwork done during contract day.
Okay.
Thank you. Mrs. Ross.
Would, how many additional speech pathologists would we need to help you bring down that load?
There have been 3. There were 3 additional last year. We went from 9 to 6, and there have been 3 open positions the entire year. So there is a slight increase. We would like to think if we hired 3 that we would be back to norms. I mean, that would help a lot.
Okay. We are looking for 3.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want you to know that that was approved budgetarily wise.
Right, right.
So we're always looking for specialty, specialists, I should
Right.
say, in its perspective. But I, in your opinion, I just want to know if we had 2 or 3, I'm hoping that would decrease all of your loads and flatten it out.
Absolutely, and it would absolutely.
Okay.
No. If I can make one more comment, you had mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Brent Seeks.
Thank you. You had mentioned coming up with a creative solution. We gave a timeline of how long we've been trying to do that, trying to come up with a solution. And that was one of our very first discussions was, what's a solution? Let's be creative. There's got to be something that can be done. We don't know. What can we do? And when it was clear nothing was, we weren't reaching a solution, it was recommended that we go to the DEA. DEA recommended that we file the grievance and that we request an extended contract because the board has granted extended contracts. And that it's our understanding that that is the purview of the board to grant an extended contract.
And I think as a board, we may need to consult with our attorney to determine if that's a possibility or not. Certainly, we don't want to do anything that would be outside of our legal rights as a board. Mrs. Graham?
Yeah, Madam Chair, is it fair to say that if we find that we are not able to do that, that we could, not let this go, that we're going to pursue a remedy?
Well, they've asked for this, and if we can't do, then we have to talk with our attorney to see what we can actually do.
So I'm saying I want to make it clear is that for some reason that the attorney says that we cannot, that we're not just going to let that go and say that at least to be my inclination that we would work to see what could be done. Because obviously a long-term solution is hiring 3. If that could have been done now, it would have already been done, right?
Yeah.
So it's in process. But there's 2 pieces of this. There's the taking care of what's been already occurring, and then there's the future piece. And so the future piece will be diligent in every way we can to get 3 hired. This piece is how do we make this, and we have to look into it, I understand that, and I would certainly recommend that, but at least I wanted to make my inclination known that if for some reason the attorney says we aren't able to do that, that we would work with to find a solution.
Well, I think it's clear based on the comments of the board that we are very appreciative of our SLPs, and I think that the mood certainly is leaning that way, but obviously we don't know until we make a motion and vote on it. So it's an interview. So at this time, unless there's any further questions, yes.
Yes, I did have another question. Do you have, in each of you individually, have you kept track of the time that you've spent outside of your contracted time? So that you could hand in X amount of minutes?
A couple of us
For
have.
periods of time.
Just to try and get an average, we have, but not over the whole year, no.
Okay.
I believe I've done 5 days, ma'am, my morning to night.
And I believe I did 1 week, and I think it was 25 hours, 27 hours.
We do know that we were made aware recently that it's possible to pull up documents on TINET, which is the program we use for all of our individualized education plans for the program. And all of those documents are time-stamped. So you can pull up and see that I was working on IEPs at 2 a.m. last Thursday.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's true of all of us. So you can see that there's lots of times when we're working on paperwork at, Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning or different times like
Well,
that.
and not that I doubt that, but like from a business perspective.
Sure. No,
people
no,
tell me
that's-
they've worked more than they really have and they can't prove it.
Right.
Or they did, and so from that perspective is where I was looking at.
Yeah.
Madam President,
Yes, Mrs. Reed.
I think at this point, personally, I think we ought to consult with our attorney and go from there.
I was just asking him if we, after we have our consultation, if we could ask the SLPs to stick around. You don't have to, but we may have more questions after we consult with our attorney.
Sure.
Okay. So then I think we'll be moving on to item D, attorney consultation for teacher grievances. Executive session is necessary. The legal authority for closing this portion of the meeting is North Dakota Century Code Section 44-04-19.2. The purpose of this executive session would be attorney consultation, teacher grievances. Is there a motion from the board?
Madam President,
Mrs. Root.
as per North Dakota Century Code and DCC 44-4-19.2, I move to close the meeting and go into executive session for the purpose of attorney consultation, teacher grievances.
I second that.
Thank you. Moved by Mrs. Root and seconded by Mr. Seeks. Is there any discussion on this motion?
Not necessarily an emotion, but can we go over there so they don't all have to exit?
No. I don't think it's not gonna.
Not gonna happen, okay.
It's not gonna be able to do that. Okay, so I will call the roll then. Mrs. Ross? Aye. Mr. Seeks?
Aye.
Mrs. Rood?
Aye.
Mrs. Fair?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, the motion carries unanimously. The executive session will be recorded, and all members of the governing body are reminded to limit their discussion during the executive session to the announced topic. Any collective decision, collective commitment, or other final action by the governing body must occur after it reconvenes in an open meeting unless final action specifically required by law to be taken during executive session. The prohibition on taking final action during the executive session does not apply to providing guidance or instructions to our attorney or negotiator. Board policy BCAD executive session allows certain individuals to be in attendance at the closed meeting as directed by the board president. The following individuals are authorized to remain in the room. School board members, Mrs. Tanya Brood, Mrs. Leslie Ross, Mrs. Chris Fair, Mr. Brent Seeks, Chair Sarah Ricks, Superintendent Douglas Sullivan, Assistant Superintendent Vince Reap, Recording Secretary Twyla Peterson, Attorney David Phillips, and also Jay Jorgensen. At this time, we will convene an executive session. We will ask the members of the public who are attending the meeting to leave the room. We anticipate adjourning the executive session and reconvening the open portion of the meeting at approximately Okay, I'm sorry. Jay Jorgensen is an associate attorney for anyone who is curious about why she's staying in the executive session. So we will plan to reconvene this meeting at approximately 5:50. 6:50. My clock is wrong on my computer. We've done a lot of neat
She's got okay, that's fine.
Those aren't our chips, so let's go to the car and get our own chips. That's for the people who are working hard at this table. Okay? Yeah. Just special for them today. You bet.